Okay, so this is a video about how to make sort of high quality lockpicks out of a piece of steel rod like this. So here's one that I've already made. You can see it's not too shabby for homemade. It's got a pretty good finish and it works really well. So I just have it in a handle like so. I'm going to be making that out of these steel rods. The tools you'll need are a little hammer, ball-peen hammer, a big hammer. You don't necessarily need the little hammer, but it's nice to have it. A pair of big wire cutters, or if you don't have this, smaller ones will work. You just have to put a lot of effort into it. A Dremel with a sanding head here, and a very fine sanding head, and then one of these rubber heads, which is normally used to fix another sanding head like this one onto. So this is a rotary sander type thing, and it's on one of these rubber heads. So just take the sander off the rubber head and just use the rubber. I found it's really good for polishing. So that's all you'll need. So, well, actually, it's handy to have a vise when you do this, but you could use just a flat piece of steel or something. But it's handy to have a vise or an anvil when you do this. So let's get to that. So here we are at the vise. Here's the steel rod. I'm going to just be using this part of the vise as almost like an anvil to pound it out on. So first thing to do is, if you have any little rough ends, just clip them off with the wire cutters. I've already cut off the rough end on this end, but it was rough like that. And you want to get rid of that before you start. So then the next step is to just pound this out until it's flat. You want to go for about a little less than 2 inches. So let's do that. So you want to pound it out till it's about that wide. I don't know if my camera's slipping here, but till it's about that wide, all the way for 2 inches or so. So I'll be back once that's done. Okay, so here we are back with this completely pounded out. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention in the beginning, it is good to have 2 files. You could do this with a Dremel, or you could do it with files, but if you have a Dremel, you probably have files. So I'm going to be using these 2 files. A flat file and a triangular file. You don't need the triangular file, but it's nice to have as well. So this has been pounded out till it's flat. It doesn't need to be neat on the edges. We're going to do that right now. So let's put it in your vise, like so, like that, and then just get your flat file and just work the edge until it's nice and flat. And do this to both sides. So when you're done filing down the sides, it should look something like this, with both sides filed down. And this is a little bit too wide at this point, at least towards the end, to become a lockpick. So I'm going to file this down a little bit more, so that it is a thin width at the very tip. This will take just a second. I say. So now it's thinned down. So this is a good enough width. Might want to thin it just a little bit more at the end, but we can do that later. Now the next step is going to be to bend the tip, so it can have a bend in it like a normal lockpick does. I'm making a kind of a deep hook, just like this one. And I'm going to do that by putting it in the vise, just the tip, very tip, clamp it down as hard as you can, and just get your small hammer, which I happen to have over here for some reason, and just tap it, and that'll help bend it without breaking it. Take it out and look and see if you have it bent. In this case, I cracked it, so I'll do that again, and I'll be back when I did it right. And if you're having a lot of trouble bending it over, like I have been here, I've tried everything. I don't know why this one won't bend. You can get your torch and heat it up, and then it will bend. But we try to avoid doing this because then I'm going to have to temper the steel again to get the temper back. So I'll do that, and we'll be back. Okay, so when you get it bent, you'll end up with something like this. And you can see it's twisted. It's not straight, not on the same plane as the other part. So just grab your hammer and fix that. Yeah. Sorry about that. Somebody was talking to me out of the video. So then once you hammer it out, it should be about like that. And we're going to cut off this extra part, 'cause I'm going to try to make a little bit less of a hook than this one. So we're going to cut this top part off a little. So once you have that done, then you just want to get all the roughness off the tip a little bit. And now we're going to start moving to the Dremel. And the only reason I'm using the Dremel is because it can go a bit faster than a file. Makes it take less time, and you can get a finer finish on it than you can with a file. So I'll move to the edge of the vise here, and we'll do that. So here we are with the Dremel. You'll want to use your heavier sanding head here, coarser, because we're just going to do the fine shaving of the edges here. Or not fine, but coarse shaving of these edges to make it smoother. And I have a variable speed Dremel. That is better. If you don't have one, it will work, but it just won't be quite as smooth. So just work over the edges until they're smooth, or at least flat, no divots in the edge. So I'll be back once I've done that. I'm going to do the top and bottom. So once you have that done, it should look something like this. And now at this point, we can remove this fin that's coming up here, the extra part of the hook. So I'm just going to get my cutters, and that takes a lot of effort. Maybe I might just grind that off since it seems to be so hard. But now at this point, I want to grind down the tip, make it thinner, and then we'll want to start finishing the sides. So I'll come back once I've ground the tip. Okay, so here we are back. I've ground the tip down. So it's like that. It's thinner along the entire shaft. And now I'm going to take my file, and I'm going to get rid of this top, on this rough top here. So this won't take long. Just grind this down. In this case, file it down. Ooh, that's bad. If you get something like this, then you'll want to put it on the vise and get your hammer and just hammer it out like so. So, not too much of a big deal if you bend it, but just be careful you don't go too fast, and if you start to notice any brittleness of the metal, you gotta heat it up before you do that or you crack it. So I'll get the tip filed down to the correct size, and I'll be back. So once you get it ground down, it should look something like this. I have the tip ground down so it's not quite so long anymore. And now, I'll put it back in the vise here. We're going to start finishing it, sort of. So, you're going to want to change your Dremel head to the fine sanding wheel, like this. And with these, they produce a lot of very fine metal dust, so you might want to wear a dust mask in this case. So, you just want to go along the edges. And smooth everything out. So, then it should look something like this. Now, you can put it in sideways with the flat side up and start finishing the sides here with the same fine sanding wheel here. So just go over the sides. they'll get a pretty fine finish with this wheel. So once you do that, you'll have a pretty fine finish on the blade of the lockpick here. And I think my light's a little too bright to see that well, so I'll turn that off for a second. But you can see it's got a pretty good finish. Now we just need to smooth the top and bottom edges just a little bit. You can use the same sanding wheel here for that. So once you smooth the edges, you want to also round them off. Because that's going to be hard. So if you round off the edges now, it'll be a lot easier. That'll be hard to do later without ruining the finish. So now we're pretty much done. We could stop at this point, but I'm going to go one step farther with the polishing and use this rubber wheel and some polishing compound on it. I'm using something called Wienol, but you could use any polishing compound, or you don't even have to use any. The rubber wheel does a fine job without it, but I like to use some. Makes it go a little faster, and this will get a nice finish on it. So I'll be back once I do that. So once you get that done, again, my light's too bright to show the good finish on it, but once you get that done, you should have almost a mirror finish on this pick. Now it's done, pretty much. Now it's down to putting a handle on it. So for handles, I use this. This is 5/16. Is it 5? Yeah, it's 5/16 dowel rod, wooden dowel. And I don't have any specific measurement for my handles. Just use whatever suits your hand best. I just take it off of my previous pick. But I use a hacksaw because it has finer teeth and it won't rip up the wood. So just cut off a good sized bit from your handle and just chamfer the edges a little bit here. Make it a little nicer. And then we want to cut off this pick. I like to cut off quite a large. I like to go inside the handle, so we just want to cut that off. Again, you can use a file for cutting that. Sometimes I do. And here's a trick for putting this into the handle. You want to put the tool in the vise here. Put the end of the pick in the vise. And tap the handle onto it, so you're not beating on your tool here. So now, just tap the handle onto it. And if you want, you can finish the edges of the handle a little more. But now this one does not look quite as nice because this one is a shorter hook, and I just didn't do quite a good enough job right there on the bottom of the pick. But I will finish that up, and it will look a lot like this one. So that is how you make a lockpick the easy way without cutting out all kinds of crazy shapes out of a piece of flat steel or something. And I'm not responsible for anything you do with these lockpicks, or if you hurt yourself trying to make one. So, hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful.